On November 7, 2022, Chinchillazilla tweeted, "Several guys moved in next door, students I guess, and I've gotten 2 confused DoorDash drivers for them in the last week, and their trash can was completely overflowing with pizza boxes. I don't think they cook. I am feeling such a strange motherly urge to feed these boys." Several days later, she quoted her own tweet and said, "I'm gonna do it," with a photo of chili being made on a stove. This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. This is the saga of the chili neighbor, one of the most tiresome sagas I ever had the displeasure of witnessing on Twitter. I probably should have covered this before episode 501, but frankly, it's tiresome. I didn't want to talk about it. Because you would think, with some of the reactions to this nice woman doing like a housewarming gesture of making food for her new neighbors, you would think that this woman was committing a war crime. And it became the locus of like every anti-social bad faith argument on Twitter. Because as far as I can tell, as far as anyone really could tell, Chinchillazilla was being sincere. And she wanted to do something nice. Is it something that you would do? Maybe not, but she was willing to do it. She must like making chili. And when she did finally deliver the chili, after a couple days of them not being home when she went over, she said, "Delivered the chili." They seemed happy and said they had just been about to order food. They also asked permission to come over and nail the fence back up. There was also an issue with the fence in between the houses. It doesn't matter. So it ended well. They took the chili. They seemed happy. But the responses that Chinchillazilla got leading up to this suggested that there was no way they possibly could be happy. People like Jolko Joe said, "Cute concept, but I would never eat food from a stranger." Surf Puff said, "Please just mind your own business." Cat doubled down, saying, "Mind your own business." Nija Feminist Media said, "It wouldn't occur for you to do this if they were girls. You are cuddling boys and further contributing to make them believe there will always be a woman available to feed them when they can't do it themselves. You aren't doing anything heroic." And people use language to describe the situation that I think is just wholly inappropriate. Like this person whose name is blacked out because this only exists in a screenshot, and whoever screenshotted it has different ethical rules about shaming people for saying dumb things on Twitter. Anyway, they said, "I've let my neighbors borrow a cup of sugar and use my kitchen appliances to cook meals. This is still not okay without getting consent." And then someone replied to this person saying that it was like grabbing the wheelchair of someone without their consent, or assuming that an elderly person on the street needed help crossing the road. And like, no, it's not. It's not like that. I think people way overread into her talking about how they got delivery every night. People projected their own anxieties and their own issues and were like, well, the reason they're getting delivery every night is because they have some issue with food, or maybe they can't deal with some food or whatever. But the obvious explanation, like loony leftist points out, is that they are college-age boys, and college-age boys like eating like garbage. If they could, they would eat pizza every night. But the thread that takes the cake, a thread that actually went on for like 40 tweets, but I only have a couple of them, is from Eb. They said such things as, "Maybe you personally would be thrilled to have your neighbor turn up with a big old pot of chili, but there's a possibility you can't eat chili for some dietary reason, or you can't eat that chili because of ingredients, or you don't have bowls. That's why you always eat pizza." Let me just say, I hate this tweet in particular a lot because I do have a dietary reason where I could not eat this chili. Chinchillazilla actually shared the recipe that she starts off with, that it involves a full beer, and I have celiac disease, I can't eat gluten, so I would not be able to eat this chili. And guess what? If this woman showed up on my door and said, "Hey, I made a bowl of chili, do you want some?" And I said, "I'd love to, but I have celiac disease. What is in the chili?" And she listed the ingredients, and I heard there was a beer, I'd say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I actually can't have that, but I love the gesture." I wanted to go through that because I wanted to demonstrate that that's not hard at all to do. And then Eb went on to talk about how they are autistic, and they don't have the energy to cook, and that they don't use regular bowls and plates, and that they mostly eat frozen dinners. And they used the example of being put upon if a neighbor brought over squash soup, and they hated squash soup. And they said, "Now I'm thinking, OMG, I have to talk to them. I have to smile at this person. I have to be nice. Oh, gross, squash soup. What the fuck am I gonna do with this? OMG, did my face show I thought that? I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. They think they're being nice." And I think what this in particular reveals, and there were a lot of posts like this, basically like saying, like, you don't know this person's life situation, you might put them in an awkward social situation. I think what this reveals, and what's so disappointing about it, is that, like, having some awkward social interactions is just like the price of being in community. That if we stop ourselves from doing nice things for people because we can think of a scenario where like it won't go well, that if they have some sort of social disorder that will complicate it, if they have a dietary restriction, if we are always thinking about those possibilities, we just will never do anything ever. You simply can't be in community with others if you're not willing to risk the interaction of like, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I actually can't eat that, but thank you for the thought." And I understand there are people for whom this social interaction would be very tough, but I do think you just can't price that in for every social interaction. And as you can imagine, like I'm expressing, there was a lot of backlash to the backlash. Meg Bitchell said, "If you think it's weird to make your neighbors a meal when they first move in, you need to log off for a very long time and learn how to be a member of your community." I think the best summation of my problem with it is what Bird Respecter said. Not trying to make everything political, but reading the fucking insane QTs, many from lefties, to what is a sweet gesture is why left movements fail in America. If you're so far removed from the idea of solidarity that you think this is wrong, your mind is irreparably poisoned. Because yeah, not to make everything political, but I think that this discourse, and the way that so much of the negativity towards Chinchillazilla was left-coded, highlights a dissonance in which there are people on the internet who purport to have very left-wing policies, but reject the idea of being social people at all. And once again, I do understand that there are people with extenuating circumstances where it's much more difficult for them to be social than others, but frankly, that's that's not a majority of people who make these arguments. Because ultimately the problem is that people aren't just talking about their own antisocial habits, some of which can be justified or can be necessary. They are arguing for antisocial habits on a societal level. There is no universe where we make major progress on anything if we have to be afraid of doing a nice gesture for our neighbor without them asking. A great thread that I'm only read the first tweet of was from the Marshall McLuhan LP, where they're talking about this event in conjunction with another event around the same time, which I'll eventually cover, called Coffee Wife. And they said, the successive events of Coffeegate and Chilligate have proven to me that there's a subculture on this website of mostly privileged disability activists, no relationship to actual disability activism, whose main approach is a sort of radical misery. And yeah, man, they summed it up pretty well. And Chilly Neighbor is now a shorthand for any discourse like this, where someone wants to do something kind and a bunch of people descend on them to say, like, no, you can't do something kind, you might make something socially awkward for 3 seconds. Like when a regular Grapes tweeted, someone I just know had a baby, you know I'm bringing lasagna over, and the same discourse popped up. Francisco Proscauer Valerio said, Twitter writers are getting lazy, what do you mean we're rehashing the Chilly Neighbor story? This one's even sillier because as the original tweet says, a regular Grapes knows this person, presumably they know if they like lasagna or not. This one might be more defensible to get angry about, where this Oklahoma man dedicated 22 homes on his block with Christmas lights. Mike Rothschild quoted that and said, new Chilly Neighbor dropped just in time for Christmas. And perhaps the most heinous one that people got mad about, because this person did a genuinely super nice thing, is where Heather Hogan tweeted about how she put out a cooler with free Gatorade for delivery drivers that were coming down her block. And people got mad at her, saying, like, you don't offer things to strangers, like, how can they trust that they're just gonna drink a random bottle of something you put out there? And Bloot Gang said, this is the Chilly Neighbor saga all over again. Look, I know I've said this before, and obviously there are caveats. I don't want anyone to take this in bad faith and act like I don't know that there are some people for whom this is not possible. But I think for most people, we are capable of being pro-social creatures, and we should invite social activity with each other. And that just because a social interaction might feel a little awkward or there might be some bumps, that does not make it unsafe, and we still should push through. And it was just so frustrating to see this woman who's doing a really nice gesture get dogpiled on because there are a lot of people who are really socially insecure who hate the idea of maybe having to have a 5-second awkward conversation with a neighbor. Not to put too fine a point on it, but there are real problems in the world, and I just can't trust you to be able to deal with any of them if a 5-second awkward conversation with a neighbor is too steep a hill to climb. Follow me for a new tweet every day, and if you like the show, please go to patreon.com/Museum of Twitter. We get a weekly bonus episode called Museum of Not Twitter, and you get to vote on a cover on Subscriber Sundays.